Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. A partnership, whether it's in marriage or in life, is a kind of architecture. You lay a foundation of trust, you build walls of shared experience, and you create a space to house a shared dream. For 12 years, the structure my wife, Isla, and I built felt unshakable. Our dream was named Oak Haven. It wasn't just a vineyard, it was our entire universe, a sprawling, sun-drenched plot of land we had poured our blood, sweat, and every last penny into. I was the hands of the operation, a man who had left a soulless corporate job to learn the ancient, patient language of the soil. I knew every vine, every row, the way the light hit the hills at dawn. Isla was the heart. She was the heart. She was the one with the brilliant palate, the charismatic face of our small, growing brand. She handled the sales, the marketing, the story of us. And it was a beautiful story. We were the couple who had risked everything for a dream, and against all odds, we were winning. Our life was a cycle of hard work and simple, profound joys. Long days under the sun, our hands stained with dirt and grape juice, followed by quiet evenings on the porch of our small farmhouse, sharing a bottle of our own wine, watching the stars appear over our sleeping vines. It was a real, tangible life, one we had built from the ground up. The financial heart of that life, the lifeblood of Oak Haven, was our joint business account. It was a constant, fluid entity. Money from sales would flow in, and money for bottles, for equipment, for corks, for the part-time help we hired during the harvest would flow out. It was never a savings account. It was an operating fund. It was the engine room of our shared dream, and we both had equal, unquestioning access to it. Our trust was so absolute that the idea of one of us misusing that account was as unthinkable as one of us setting fire to the vineyard itself. Then came the girls' trip. Isla announced it a month in advance. A week in a luxury spa resort in a tropical paradise with her old college friends. A chance to recharge her batteries, she said. I was happy for her. She worked so hard. She deserved a break, a week of pampering away from the constant demands of the vineyard. I saw it as an investment in her happiness, and therefore an investment in ours. I remember the day she left with a clarity that now feels like a physical scar. She kissed me goodbye, a quick, almost formal kiss, and told me not to work too hard. She was radiant, excited, her eyes sparkling with an energy I hadn't seen in a while. I mistook it for joyful anticipation. I now know it was the thrill of a successful escape. For 5 days, I lived the life of the supportive husband, holding down the fort. I managed the bottling line, I met with distributors, I walked the rows of vines in the evenings, the quiet companionship of the land my only partner. I sent her texts telling her I missed her, that I hoped she was having a wonderful time. Her replies were short, sporadic, full of exclamation points and cheerful, generic updates. She was getting a massage, she was lying by the pool, she was having cocktails. It was all a perfect, plausible lie. The end came not with a bang, but with a text message. It arrived on a Friday afternoon as I was standing in the cool, quiet dark of our barrel room, the air thick with the angel share. My phone buzzed. It was from her. But the words were not the words of a wife on vacation.
They were the words of a stranger ending a business relationship. A lister, it read, "I am not coming back. I have met someone. I have moved on. I have taken my half to start my new life. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce and the vineyard." I read it once, then again, the words refusing to make sense. My half? What did she mean? Her half? Our life wasn't a pie to be sliced. It was a living, breathing thing. I stumbled out of the barrel room, my heart a frantic, panic drum against my ribs. I scrambled into the small farmhouse office, my hands shaking as I logged into our online banking portal. The page for our joint business account loaded. Balance, $6.72. $6.72. She had taken everything, every last penny. The money we needed for payroll for the harvest crew next month. The money we owed our bottle supplier. The money that was the very oxygen our dream needed to breathe. She hadn't just taken her half, she had taken it all. and in doing so, she had slit the throat of the very thing we had spent 12 years building. I sank into my chair, the world a blurry, meaningless haze. I was stranded, a captain on a ship that was dead in the water, its engines revved out. I looked out the window at the vineyard, at the rows of vines stretching up the hill, a testament to a shared dream that had just been revealed as a solo nightmare. She had left me in the ruins, a broken-hearted fool in a paradise that had just become my prison. The pain was absolute, but as the sun began to set, casting long, mournful shadows across my dying vineyard, a new, cold thought began to form. She had been so meticulous, so ruthless. She thought she had executed the perfect plan. She thought she had taken everything. She had no idea about the covenant. She had no idea that the real foundation of our dream wasn't built on the money in that account. It was built on a contract of character, a contract she had just, with her own greedy hands, set on fire. The first 24 hours after the text were a blur of pure, unadulterated shock. My mind kept replaying her words, trying to find a loophole, a misunderstanding. But the zero balance in our bank account was an unassailable, brutal truth. The grief was a physical force, a weight that settled in my chest and made it hard to breathe. The vineyard, which had always been my sanctuary, now felt like a mausoleum, a monument to a colossal and devastating act of foolishness. My foolishness. I had trusted her. I had built my entire world on the bedrock of that trust, and she had dynamited it from beneath me. But as the second they dawned, the engineer in my brain, the part of me that is methodical, that analyzes structures and finds their breaking points, began to stir. The emotional devastation was real, but my survival depended on a calm, rational assessment of the damage. And as I began to piece together the architecture of her betrayal, I started to remember the true architecture of our vineyard's foundation. And a cold, terrible, and incredibly empowering sense of clarity began to wash over me. Oakhaven was not built on our savings. We were two young people with a dream, not a fortune. We had bought the land and funded the initial years of planting and development with a single, unconventional loan. It wasn't from a bank. Banks don't gamble on dreamers. The loan was from a man named Silas Croft, a legendary, semi-retired vineyard owner, a tough, brilliant old man who had been my mentor. Silas didn't invest in business plans. He invested in people. He had given us the loan of a lifetime based on one condition: his belief in us, in our partnership. And he had formalized that belief in a contract that was as unique and uncompromising as he was. It was a private loan agreement, and buried deep in its clauses was a section he had called the Partnership Covenant. I remembered him explaining it to us in his gravelly voice, his eyes fixed on us, weighing our character. The covenant stated that the loan was being extended not to two individuals, but to the partnership itself, a legal and moral entity. The favorable terms, the low interest rate, the flexible repayment schedule, it was all contingent on the continued good faith existence of that partnership. And then came the clause that I now recited to myself in the dark of my empty farmhouse like a prayer. It stipulated that if the partnership was dissolved through a malicious, bad faith act by one partner against the other, an act defined by criteria including but not limited to fraud, embezzlement, or abandonment, the covenant would be considered breached. The consequences of that breach were not a simple penalty, they were catastrophic. The entire outstanding balance of the loan would become immediately due and payable. And the collateral for that loan, this was the beautiful, hidden genius of Silas's contract. The collateral was not the vineyard itself. Silas had no interest in repossessing a failed business. The collateral was the asset that Isla had brought to the marriage, the asset that had served as our initial down payment and proof of stake. It was a portfolio of rare Art Deco jewelry she had inherited from her grandmother, an inheritance of immense monetary and sentimental value. She had believed, and I had believed, that we had liquidated that portfolio to fund our dream. But Silas, in his infinite old-world wisdom, had insisted on a different arrangement. He had not taken the cash from the sale. He had taken the jewelry itself,
to be held in trust by his lawyers as the sole collateral on the loan. He had seen it as a symbol of her commitment, a tangible piece of her past that guaranteed her good faith in their shared future. The truth was a blinding, beautiful, and utterly devastating revelation. Isla thought she had cashed out her inheritance years ago. She had no idea it was simply being held in escrow, a sleeping dragon guarding the terms of our agreement. And by emptying our joint account, by performing the ultimate act of malicious bad faith abandonment, she had just kicked that dragon squarely in the face. She had not just stolen our operating capital. She had single-handedly triggered the default clause on a loan that was secured by her entire personal fortune. She thought she had walked away with a few $100,000 of our shared money. She had no idea she had just forfeited an inheritance worth 10 times that amount. A profound, chilling calm settled over me. I did not need to fight her. I did not need to hire lawyers to try and claw back the money she had taken. I did not even need to speak to her. She had already lost. She just didn't know it yet. My plan, if you could call it that, was one of absolute strategic inaction. I would let her have her victory lap. I would let her and her new lover, whoever he was, celebrate their cleverness, their ruthlessness, their new stolen life. I would let them spend the money they had taken, digging themselves deeper into a lifestyle they could not afford. All I had to do was make a single, quiet phone call. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Silas's estate. His old, familiar, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "Silas," I said, my own voice steady and clear. "It's Alistair. I'm calling to inform you that the partnership covenant has been breached." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then a deep, weary sigh. "I see," he said. "I'm sorry to hear that, son. Truly sorry. The lawyers will be in touch with her." The mechanism was now in motion.
The trap she had built for me had just snapped shut on her. The days that followed my phone call to Silas were a strange mix of profound grief and cold, methodical purpose. The betrayal was still a raw, open wound, but now I had a grim, secret comfort. The knowledge that the scales of justice were already, silently, tipping back. While Isla was off celebrating her new life, I was left to preside over the funeral of our old one. Her act of theft had been a mortal blow to Oakhaven. Without operating capital, the vineyard was dying. The first casualty was the harvest crew. I had to call a dozen good, hard-working local men and women and tell them there was no work for them, that the money for their payroll was gone. The shame of that conversation was a heavy, bitter pill. Next, I had to face our suppliers. I spent days on the phone, a broken man making promises I wasn't sure I could keep, negotiating payment plans for bottles we couldn't afford, for labels we couldn't buy. Every call was a fresh humiliation, a new reminder of the scale of Isla's destruction. I was forced to sell off assets, piece by painful piece. A new tractor we had just bought, a symbol of our success, was sold for a fraction of its worth. I sold barrels, fermentation tanks, even the beautiful handcrafted sign at the entrance to our property. I was liquidating our dream, turning our shared history into a series of desperate, depressing transactions, all to keep the bank from foreclosing on the land itself. Through it all, I maintained my silence. I did not contact Isla. I did not reply to the sterile, procedural emails from her lawyer. I let her believe she was in complete control, that I was a broken, defeated man, too devastated to even fight back. My silence was my greatest weapon. It allowed her to build her new life on a foundation of pure, blissful ignorance. And she was building it with a frantic, celebratory speed. A distant cousin, torn between loyalty and a love of gossip, would occasionally forward me screenshots of Isla's social media. Her new life was a carefully curated performance of freedom and wealth. Her new partner was a man named Julian, a slick, handsome lifestyle consultant who seemed to specialize in spending other people's money. There were pictures of them in a sleek, minimalist apartment in the city, raising champagne glasses with the caption, "To New Beginnings."
There were pictures of a new sports car, of expensive dinners, of a weekend trip to a boutique hotel. They were burning through the money from our joint account with a speed that was both horrifying and, in a dark, twisted way, deeply satisfying. Every dollar they spent was another shovel of dirt on top of their own financial grave. About 2 weeks after my call to Silas, the first tremor hit their perfect new world. My cousin sent me a screenshot of a cryptic post from Isla. It was a picture of a legal-looking envelope with the caption, "Some people just can't let go. #move on." I knew exactly what it was. It was the first formal notice from Silas's lawyers, a polite but firm letter informing her that the loan was in default and that the full balance was now due. She had clearly dismissed it, seeing it as a pathetic, empty threat from me, her broken ex-husband. She had no idea the letter had come not from a place of emotional weakness, but from a position of absolute contractual power. She thought I was lashing out. She had no concept of the legal and financial avalanche that was beginning to slide toward her. She ignored the warning. And so the process continued, moving with the slow, inexorable grind of the law. A second notice was sent, this one less polite. And then came the one I had been waiting for, a formal notice of intent to seize the collateral, the jewelry, her inheritance, the foundation of her own personal wealth. The final act was about to begin. I spent my days in the vineyard, now quiet and empty. I walked the rows, my hands tending to the vines, not for a harvest that would never come, but out of a deep, abiding sense of duty. I was a caretaker of a graveyard, a historian preserving a ruin. I was waiting for the phone to ring. I knew that soon her world of blissful ignorance would collide with the brutal, contractual reality she had created. The panic, when it came, would be total, and I would be the only person she could turn to. I would be ready, not with forgiveness, but with a final, devastating lesson in cause and effect. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month to the day after she had sent her life-destroying text message. I was pruning a row of dormant vines, the air crisp and cold, the only sound the sharp snip of my shears. The caller ID was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew it was her. I let it ring 4 times, then answered, my voice calm and neutral. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was a frantic, unrecognizable shriek. It was Isla, but all the polished, confident charm was gone, stripped away to reveal a raw, panicked terror. "Alistair, what did you do?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "What did you tell that old man? His lawyers are trying to steal my grandmother's jewelry. They're saying I owe them millions of dollars. This is your fault." I was silent for a moment, letting her frantic accusations hang in the cold morning air. "My fault?" I finally said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of the past month. "Isla, I haven't spoken a word to you. I have done nothing. You, on the other hand, have been very busy." "This is some sick, twisted game you're playing to get back at me," she cried. "You're trying to scare me. You can't touch my inheritance." "You are absolutely right," I said calmly. "I can't touch your inheritance, but you could. And you did."
You bet your entire inheritance on a single bad faith act, and you lost. I agreed to meet her. She demanded I come to her lawyer's office, to a place of power on her turf. I refused. "No," I said. "If you want to talk to me, you will come here, to Oak Haven. I'll be at the farmhouse tomorrow at noon." She had no choice, and she knew it. She arrived the next day, her new sports car a garish, alien object against the rustic, dying beauty of the vineyard. Her new man, Julian, was with her, his handsome face a mask of aggression and confusion. They stormed into the farmhouse, a place now filled with boxes and the sad, echoing silence of a life being packed away. Isla launched immediately into a tirade, a torrent of accusations and threats. I let her exhaust herself, my face an unreadable mask. When she finally ran out of breath, I looked not at her, but at Julian. "You're a lifestyle consultant, I hear," I said, my voice conversational. "Let me ask you a question.
When you advise a client to liquidate a business's entire operating fund for personal use, do you also advise them on the consequences of defaulting on the loan that funded the business in the first place? Julian stared at me, his slick, confident persona beginning to crumble. He had no idea what I was talking about. And then I laid it all out for them. I did not raise my voice. I did not use a single word of anger or accusation. I spoke like an engineer explaining a structural failure. I explained the partnership covenant. I explained the unique nature of Silas's loan. I explained that her grandmother's jewelry was not a memory, but an active, legally binding collateral. I walked them painful step, through the sequence of events she had initiated. I explained that her text message, her withdrawal, her abandonment, it was all a signed, notarized confession to a breach of contract. You see, I said, my gaze finally settling on Isla, you thought you were emptying a savings account. You weren't. You were robbing the engine room of a heavily mortgaged, deeply indebted business. You didn't steal our profits, Isla. There were no profits. You stole our debt. And the price of that debt, the collateral you so confidently wagered, was your own past. The look on her face was a slow-motion demolition. I saw the disbelief, the denial, and then the dawning, catastrophic understanding. She looked at Julian, her eyes pleading for him to tell her it wasn't true, but he was staring at her with a new, horrified expression. He was not looking at a wealthy heiress. He was looking at a woman in millions of dollars of personal debt. He was a consultant, and his client had just gone bankrupt. She turned back to me, her voice a pathetic, broken whisper. You could have warned me. You could have been a partner, I replied. You could have been a wife. You made your choice. You chose to start a new life with your half. Well, this is your half. A mountain of debt and a legal battle with a man who has no reason to show you any mercy. The vineyard is finished. I'm selling the land to pay off what I can. Your inheritance and your new life is a matter between you and Silas Croft. I had not come for a fight. I had come to present the final invoice. I stood up, the meeting over. I believe you know the way out, I said. I walked out of the farmhouse and into the vineyard, leaving them in the cold, silent ruins of the dream they had helped me build and she had single-handedly destroyed. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had lost my wife, my home, and my dream. But I had survived. I had my integrity. I had my freedom from her. And in the quiet, empty fields of Oak Haven, I knew I could build something new. Something on a foundation that no one could ever take from me again. You've been listening to Reddit Whispers. When did you realize life would never be the same again? Share your story. It could mean everything to someone else.